Imagine a life built on a foundation of seemingly endless wealth, a world where every desire was met, every dream within reach. Now imagine that world collapsing in an instant, not with a bang, but with a terrifying silence. A funeral, a quiet, somber affair that should have marked an end, but instead opened the door to an unthinkable beginning. Because for some, the greatest inheritance isn't gold or jewels, but a legacy of secrets so dark, so ancient, they can swallow everything you thought you knew. What happens when the family fortune simply vanishes after the final farewell? And what unspeakable truths are left in its wake? Get ready, because the story you're about to hear is far more than a tale of lost riches. It's a journey into the heart of a hidden power, a web of betrayal, and a battle for survival against shadows older than time itself. It's the kind of silence that settles over a place after something immense has irrevocably shifted, a void where life and laughter once echoed. The grand Victorian house, perched on a hill overlooking the sleepy town of Havenwood, now stood draped in an unnerving stillness. Just days ago, it had been filled with the somber murmur of mourners, the scent of lilies overpowering the familiar musty aroma of old money and forgotten memories. Now only the ghosts seemed to linger, their presence a palpable weight in the air that Amelia could almost taste. She stood in the cavernous living room, sunlight struggling to penetrate the heavy velvet curtains that her late husband, Charles, had always insisted on keeping drawn. Dust motes danced in the faint beams that managed to slice through, each one a tiny reminder of the time that continued to march on, indifferent to the seismic shift that had occurred in her world. Charles was gone. Her rock, her confidant, the man who had swept her off her feet with his old-world charm and the promise of a life she could never have imagined, was now just a memory, a portrait hanging crookedly in the hallway that she couldn't bring herself to straighten. Their life together had been a fairy tale, at least on the surface. Amelia, a small-town librarian with a penchant for Jane Austen and a quiet existence, had met Charles at a charity gala. He was older, distinguished, with eyes that held a hint of melancholy and a smile that could melt glaciers. He had spoken of his travels, his philanthropic endeavors, and the sprawling estate that had been in his family for generations. Amelia, who had never ventured far beyond the county lines, was captivated. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a wedding that was the talk of Havenwood, a seamless blending of her humble background and his considerable wealth. For 15 years, they had built a life within the walls of this grand house. There were lavish parties, quiet evenings spent by the fireplace with a book in hand, and trips to exotic locales that Amelia had only ever dreamed of. Charles was generous, doting, and seemed to anticipate her every need. She had never questioned their fortune, accepting it as an inherent part of his legacy. The occasional whispers from the townsfolk about his family's reclusive nature and the source of their wealth were always brushed aside by Charles with a charmingly dismissive wave of his hand. "Let them talk, my dear," he would say, his eyes twinkling. "Envy makes people imaginative." Now, standing in the echoing silence after his funeral, those whispers seemed to take on a more sinister tone in Amelia's mind. The funeral itself had been a grand affair, befitting a man of Charles's stature. Prominent figures from the town, and even some from the city, had come to pay their respects. Amelia had moved through the motions in a daze of grief, the support of her few close friends and family a distant comfort. She had expected the reading of the will to be a formality, a simple confirmation of the life Charles had provided for her. The lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, had requested a private meeting a few days after the service. Amelia had sat in his dimly lit office, the scent of old paper and legal jargon thick in the air, feeling a growing sense of unease. Mr. Abernathy had cleared his throat several times, adjusting his spectacles before delivering the news that had sent a cold wave of disbelief crashing over her. "Mrs. Blackwood," he had begun, his voice low and hesitant, "I regret to inform you that after a thorough review of Mr. Blackwood's assets, there appears to be a significant discrepancy." Discrepancy. The word had hung in the air, innocuous yet laden with a weight Amelia couldn't comprehend. She had waited, her heart pounding in her chest, as Mr. Abernathy painstakingly explained the unbelievable truth. The vast fortune she had believed to be their foundation, the source of their comfortable and luxurious life, had vanished, gone, evaporated like morning mist. The accounts were empty. The investments were liquidated. The valuable artwork and antiques that adorned the house were nowhere to be found on any inventory. Even the deeds to the sprawling estate were complicated, tied up in a web of obscure holdings and shell corporations that Mr. Abernathy was still trying to unravel. Amelia had stared at him, her mind refusing to process the words. It felt like a cruel joke, a bizarre misunderstanding. But Charles, his family? She had stammered, the carefully constructed reality of her life crumbling around her. Mr. Abernathy had sighed, a weary sound that spoke volumes. Mrs. Blackwood, we are still investigating, but it seems that Mr. Blackwood's financial situation was far more precarious than anyone realized. There are indications of significant debt, risky investments that went sour, and a series of complex transactions that are proving difficult to trace. As she stood in the silent living room, the weight of Mr. Abernathy's words pressed down on her. How could this be? Where had all the money gone? Had their entire life together been built on a foundation of illusion? The man she had loved, the man she thought she knew, was now shrouded in a cloud of unsettling questions. A faint creak from the hallway broke her reverie. Amelia's breath hitched in her throat. The house had been full of strange noises lately, settling sounds magnified by her solitude and heightened anxiety. But this was different, a deliberate sound. She held her breath, straining to hear over the frantic thumping of her own heart. Footsteps. Soft, hesitant, but definitely footsteps, moving somewhere within the vast expanse of the house. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the numbness of her grief. She was alone in this sprawling mansion, stripped bare of its financial security, and now, it seemed, possibly harboring secrets, and perhaps something more sinister. Who else could be in the house? The staff had been let go in the immediate aftermath of Charles's death, a necessary measure given the sudden lack of funds. She had assumed she was the only one rattling around in its echoing rooms. Slowly, cautiously, Amelia moved towards the hallway, her senses on high alert. The portrait of Charles seemed to watch her with an inscrutable gaze, his familiar smile now tinged with an unsettling ambiguity. Had she ever truly known him? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as she crept towards the source of the sound. The silence of the house pregnant with unspoken possibilities and the chilling realization that the disappearance of the family fortune might be the least of her worries. The mystery had begun, born from the ashes of a funeral and the unsettling quiet that followed. The soft footsteps grew louder, drawing Amelia further down the dimly lit hallway. Each breath she took felt like a gasp, the air in the old house suddenly thick with foreboding. She rounded the corner, her hand instinctively reaching for the heavy wooden banister of the grand staircase. The sound seemed to emanate from the library, Charles's sanctuary, a room he guarded with a possessive fervor that Amelia had always found endearing, if a little eccentric. He spent hours in there, surrounded by dusty tomes and ancient maps, often emerging with a far-off look in his eyes. A sliver of light escaped from beneath the library door, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness of the hallway. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She paused, straining to hear over the din of her own fear. Was it a burglar? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her. But a burglar wouldn't be moving so cautiously, so deliberately. There was a rhythm to the sounds, a rustling, almost like papers being shifted. Taking a shaky breath, Amelia pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. The sight that greeted her was not what she expected, yet somehow it amplified her terror. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a single desk lamp, illuminating a figure hunched over Charles's enormous mahogany desk. It wasn't a stranger. It was Eleanor Vance, Charles's distant cousin, a woman Amelia had only met a handful of times at family gatherings. Eleanor was a shadowy figure, always impeccably dressed in dark, severe clothing, with a sharp, calculating glint in her eyes that had always made Amelia feel uneasy. She had arrived for the funeral, stayed for a few days, and Amelia had assumed she'd left with the rest of the mourners. Eleanor was meticulously sifting through a stack of documents, her movements precise and unhurried. Spread across the desk were ledgers, old letters, and what looked like a series of photographs. As Amelia watched, hidden in the shadows of the doorway, Eleanor picked up one of the photos, holding it close to the lamp. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a chilling expression that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. It wasn't a smile of warmth or amusement, but one of grim satisfaction. The silence in the house, previously filled with Amelia's internal dread, was now punctuated by the soft rustle of paper as Eleanor continued her search. Amelia felt a surge of indignation mix with her fear. What was Eleanor doing here? And what was she looking for? The lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, had explicitly stated that all of Charles's personal effects were to remain untouched until the full investigation was complete. Eleanor's presence, coupled with the missing fortune, suddenly painted a far more unsettling picture. As if sensing Amelia's gaze, Eleanor slowly raised her head, her eyes, sharp and intelligent, sweeping across the darkened room. Amelia instinctively pulled back, pressing herself against the wall, her breath caught in her throat. Had Eleanor seen her? The moment stretched agonizingly long. Then, Eleanor sighed, a weary sound, and returned to her task, her focus unwavering. Amelia's mind raced. This wasn't just about missing money anymore. This felt like a deliberate act, a calculated unraveling. Charles, for all his charm, had always been intensely private, especially about his family history. He rarely spoke of his parents, who had died young, or any extended relatives, beyond a passing mention of their reclusive nature. Eleanor's sudden appearance and her clandestine activity in the library, the very heart of Charles's private world, suggested a connection that went far deeper than polite cousinhood. Driven by a desperate need for answers and a growing sense of betrayal, Amelia knew she couldn't confront Eleanor directly. Not yet. She needed to understand what Eleanor was looking for, and more importantly, what she already knew. Slipping away from the door, Amelia crept back towards the living room, her mind buzzing with a dizzying array of possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She remembered an old, dusty leather-bound journal Charles kept in a hidden compartment in his bedside table, a place he thought only he knew about. It was a habit of his, keeping small, seemingly insignificant secrets. She had stumbled upon it once while tidying, a brief glimpse of its elegant script before Charles had gently, but firmly, taken it from her, a rare flash of annoyance in his usually serene demeanor. He had simply said it was an old family diary, nothing of interest. Now, the memory of his quick dismissal felt chilling. Later that night, as silence once again descended upon the house, broken only by the mournful hoot of an owl outside, Amelia made her way to their bedroom. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the hidden catch on the bedside table. With a soft click, the compartment sprang open. Inside, nestled amongst some old coins and a tarnished silver locket, was the journal. She pulled it out, her fingers tracing the faded gold lettering on its spine. It was heavier than she remembered. Back in the living room, under the dim light of a single lamp, Amelia began to read. The journal wasn't a diary in the traditional sense. It was more like a meticulously kept record, handwritten in Charles's elegant, precise script. It detailed financial transactions, properties, names, and dates, but interspersed with these dry entries were cryptic notes, almost like coded messages. Phrases like the Havenwood Trust, the Labyrinth's Key, and the Serpent's Coil appeared repeatedly, each one a chilling whisper of a secret world. As she delved deeper, a name started to appear with alarming frequency. The Collective. Charles's entries described it in hushed, almost fearful tones, as a powerful, secretive organization. There were references to obligations, sacrifices, and the cost of silence. Her blood ran cold. This was not the Charles she knew, the philanthropic, charming man. This was someone entangled in something far more sinister, something that explained the sudden disappearance of their fortune. Then, a particularly disturbing entry caught her eye. Eleanor's betrayal, the first fracture. The consequences will be dire. Amelia's gaze snapped up, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Eleanor, the cousin who was currently rifling through Charles's private papers. Had she always been involved? Or was she now, after Charles's death, trying to seize something she believed was hers? The journal also spoke of a legacy, not of money, but of something far more ancient and powerful, something hidden within the very foundations of Havenwood. It seemed the fortune wasn't just gone. It had been diverted, used for some darker purpose, a purpose inextricably linked to this collective, and a secret buried deep within the town itself. Charles hadn't just lost their money. He had been part of something that had finally caught up to him. Amelia closed the journal, her hands shaking. The seemingly idyllic life she had shared with Charles now felt like a carefully constructed facade. The man she loved was a stranger, and his death, she now suspected, was not a natural end, but a consequence. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Charles hadn't just died. He had been trying to escape something, and he had failed. And now, she, Amelia, was caught in the terrifying aftermath. A pawn in a game she didn't understand, surrounded by shadows and a growing sense of dread. The silence of the house no longer felt empty. It felt pregnant with unspeakable secrets, waiting to engulf her. The game had just begun, and Amelia was dangerously, irrevocably. The chilling revelations from Charles's journal ripped through Amelia's carefully constructed world. The man she loved, the life she thought she knew, lay shattered before her, replaced by a terrifying labyrinth of secrets. Eleanor's presence in the library, no longer a mere intrusion, now felt like a predatory hunt. The collective, the labyrinth's key, the serpent's coil, these phrases echoed in her mind, each one a thread in a dark tapestry she was beginning to unravel. Amelia clutched the journal to her chest, her knuckles white. The quiet house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a suffocating tomb, every shadow a potential threat. She knew she couldn't stay here, not without understanding the full scope of the danger. The journal spoke of Havenwood's foundations, hinting at something physically hidden within the town, something connected to this terrifying collective and the lost fortune. Charles hadn't just been a victim of a bad investment. He had been trapped in something far larger, far older, and far more sinister. The thought of confronting Eleanor directly was tempting, a desperate urge to demand answers. But the journal's chilling entry, Eleanor's betrayal, the first fracture, held her back. Eleanor was clearly not just a curious relative. She was an active participant in this twisted drama, perhaps even the architect of Charles's demise. Amelia needed to be smart, to use the information in the journal to her advantage, to find the key Charles mentioned before Eleanor did. Her gaze fell on an old, intricately carved wooden box on Charles's desk, often overlooked. He'd always kept it locked, dismissing it as old family trinkets. Now, with the journal's cryptic clues, Amelia felt a sudden jolt of intuition. The labyrinth's key. Could it be a literal key? And what if the box held more than just trinkets? With trembling hands, Amelia searched the desk drawers, sifting through Charles's meticulously organized papers. She found nothing. Frustration bubbled. But then her eyes caught a subtle discoloration on the underside of the top drawer. She pulled it out completely, revealing a hidden compartment, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. Inside, nestled on a velvet lining, was a single tarnished brass key, intricately shaped, unlike any she had ever seen. This had to be it. Her heart pounded as she approached the wooden box. The key slid into the lock with a soft click. As the lid creaked open, a faint, metallic scent filled the air, like aged copper and something else, something ancient and earthy. Inside, instead of trinkets, lay a series of rolled-up parchment scrolls, bound with faded silk ribbons. Their edges were brittle with age, and the script on them was an archaic, elegant hand, similar to Charles's but undeniably older. Amelia carefully unrolled the first scroll. It wasn't a map, not in the traditional sense, but a series of interconnected diagrams and symbols, interspersed with lines of Latin. Her eyes scanned the familiar crest of the Blackwood family, engraved subtly in the corner, a symbol she'd seen on their silverware and stationery. But alongside it were other symbols, unsettling and alien, depicting serpents coiling around strange, glowing orbs, and figures cloaked in shadow. This was clearly a lineage, a secret society, and Charles had been deeply embedded in it. One diagram, more detailed than the others, depicted a complex subterranean network beneath Havenwood, marked with cryptic coordinates. It showed tunnels, chambers, and what looked like an enormous vault or repository. And at its heart, a symbol Amelia now recognized from the journal, the serpent's coil. This wasn't just a hidden fortune. It was a hidden legacy, something more profound and terrifying than she could have imagined. Charles hadn't lost the fortune. He had moved it, or rather, it was part of this elaborate ancient system. As Amelia studied the scrolls, a chilling realization dawned on her. The financial assets Charles had supposedly lost were merely a distraction, a smokescreen. The real wealth, the true family fortune, was not monetary in the traditional sense. It was something else entirely, something safeguarded, something that required intricate knowledge of these hidden passages and a code that only a select few possessed. And this collective was clearly the guardian of this secret. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked directly above her. From Charles's study, a room Amelia had just realized was directly above the library where Eleanor had been. Amelia froze, the scrolls clutched in her hands. Eleanor. She must have still been in the house, probably searching in the study, growing more desperate. The realization that Eleanor was also looking for these very same secrets, perhaps even the scrolls themselves, sent a fresh jolt of fear through Amelia. Eleanor wasn't just trying to find money. She was trying to uncover the true nature of this hidden legacy. Amelia quickly rolled up the parchments, tucking them back into the box. She had to get out to somewhere safe to process what she had just discovered. But as she moved to close the box, a glint of metal caught her eye. Beneath the scrolls, nestled in the bottom, was a small, ornate locket, identical to the tarnished silver one she had found earlier in the hidden compartment in the bedside table. But this one was made of gleaming gold, and etched into its surface was the same coiled serpent symbol from the scrolls. It felt warm to the touch, almost pulsing with a faint energy. As she reached for it, the heavy library door creaked open, slowly, deliberately. Amelia's head snapped up. Standing silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway was Eleanor Vance, her figure rigid, her face unreadable in the gloom, but her eyes, even from this distance, seemed to gleam with a chilling intensity. She held a small, ornate dagger in her hand, its blade glinting faintly. "Amelia!" Eleanor's voice was a low whisper, cutting through the silence like ice. "I believe you have something that belongs to me, or rather, to us." The air crackled with unspoken threats. The game had escalated. Amelia was no longer just an unknowing widow. She was an intruder, a threat, in a dangerous game far older than she could comprehend. She clutched the golden locket, its warmth a small comfort against the cold dread that now enveloped her. She had the key, the scrolls, and now this locket. But Eleanor had a knife, and the knowledge that Amelia was now privy to secrets that could cost her everything. The true nature of the family fortune, and the sinister collective that guarded it, was about to reveal itself, and Amelia was standing right in its path. The air crackled with a silent tension that felt heavier than any physical weight. Eleanor stood in the doorway, a menacing silhouette against the dim light, the ornate dagger glinting in her hand like a promise of pain. Amelia clutched the golden locket, its warmth a stark contrast to the icy dread that gripped her. The scrolls lay partially exposed in the wooden box, a testament to the chilling truth she had just uncovered. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, a legacy, and a secret society Amelia was now dangerously entangled with. "To us, Eleanor?" Amelia's voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence, laced with a mix of fear and defiance. "What exactly belongs to us? And what have you done to Charles?" Eleanor stepped further into the room, her eyes never leaving Amelia's face. A thin, humorless smile touched her lips. Poor, naive Amelia, always so trusting, so blind to the true nature of things. Charles didn't do anything to the fortune. He was the fortune. Or rather, He was its last keeper, its most foolish guardian. Her words sent a fresh wave of horror through Amelia. "What are you talking about? The Blackwood legacy, my dear," Eleanor purred, taking another slow step closer. "It's not about gold or stocks. It's about knowledge, about power, about a control that has been passed down through generations. Our family, the true Blackwood line, has been safeguarding something for centuries. Something hidden beneath Havenwood, something that allows us influence. The money you enjoyed was merely a byproduct, a lubricant for the gears of a much larger machine." Eleanor gestured vaguely towards the room. Charles, bless his simple heart, tried to break away. He thought he could have a normal life, a normal wife, and simply abandon his duties. He started diverting funds, liquidating assets, thinking he could buy his freedom. Foolish. The collective doesn't allow desertion, especially not when you hold the key to their most sacred trust. Amelia's mind reeled. The collective? What is it? The collective is the ancient order that oversees the Havenwood Trust, Eleanor explained, a chilling pedagogical tone entering her voice. We are the true guardians of this town, its hidden power. Charles was supposed to succeed his father, to maintain the balance, to ensure the continuous flow of resources. But he grew weak. He fell in love with you, Amelia, and that was his first mistake. You softened him, made him question his destiny. The bitterness in Eleanor's voice was palpable. He tried to dismantle the trust, to dismantle us. He even tried to reach out to outsiders to expose what we protect. That's why he was losing money, Amelia. He wasn't losing it. He was paying it, trying to sever ties, trying to buy silence from those he involved in his pathetic rebellion. And you? Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Were you part of this rebellion? Or did you stop him? Eleanor laughed, a dry, rasping sound that sent shivers down Amelia's spine. I warned him, Amelia. I begged him to reconsider. I reminded him of the oaths, of the consequences. But Charles was stubborn, blinded by sentiment. When he refused to yield, when he began jeopardizing everything, I had no choice. The collective demanded action. Amelia stared at her, the truth slamming into her with brutal force. You killed him. It wasn't a question, but a raw, agonizing accusation. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, cold and unyielding. Charles suffered a sudden, unexpected heart attack. The doctors confirmed it. No foul play. A man under immense stress, attempting to escape his responsibilities. It was a mercy in its own way, a necessary end to a dangerous delusion. And the journal? Amelia raised the book, her hand shaking. The scrolls? What are you truly looking for? The true keys, Amelia? Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a low, predatory growl as she took another step, the dagger now clearly visible. The final piece of the puzzle. Charles, in his desperation, moved the core of the legacy. He scattered clues, thinking he could hide it, perhaps even destroy it. But he miscalculated. He hid it too well, even from himself. And now, thanks to his misguided attempts, the true fortune, the essence of the Blackwood power, is vulnerable. Eleanor gestured with the dagger towards the golden locket in Amelia's hand. That locket, and the others hidden in this house, are not mere trinkets. They are conduits, part of a map, a guide to the innermost sanctum of the Havenwood Trust. Charles intended them as a failsafe, a final act of defiance. He wanted you to find them, to unravel his desperate attempt at freedom. Amelia looked down at the locket, then back at Eleanor, a horrifying mosaic of betrayal, ancient power, and murder finally clicking into place. Charles hadn't disappeared his fortune. He had tried to dismantle a powerful, sinister organization, and in doing so, he had become its victim. And now, Amelia held the very objects that would either complete Charles's futile rebellion or lead Eleanor and the collective to their ultimate prize. You won't get them, Amelia said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a fierce, desperate resolve. She knew she was outmatched, outmaneuvered, but she wouldn't surrender. Not for Charles, not for the innocent life she had once led. Eleanor simply smiled, a chilling, triumphant expression. "Oh, but I will, dear Amelia. You have no idea what you're up against. The Blackwood legacy is a river that always finds its way back to the sea. And you, my dear, are merely a pebble in its path." With a sudden, swift movement, Eleanor lunged. The dagger glinted, a silent promise of swift oblivion. Amelia reacted on instinct, throwing the wooden box containing the scrolls directly at Eleanor's face. The impact was jarring, a sharp thud that made Eleanor stumble back, momentarily disoriented. That was all Amelia needed. She spun around, clutching the golden locket, and bolted towards the nearest exit, the large, ornate glass doors leading to the moonlit garden. She didn't know where she was going, or what she would do, but one thing was clear. The grand facade of the Blackwood fortune was gone, replaced by a deadly inheritance, and Amelia was now fighting for her very life against a sinister, ancient power that would stop at nothing to reclaim what it believed was its own. The night had just truly begun. The shattering of glass echoed through the grand house, a symphony of destruction marking Amelia's desperate escape. She burst through the French doors, shards flying, landing heavily on the manicured lawn. The cool night air hit her face, a jolt of reality after the suffocating dread of the library. Behind her, Eleanor's enraged cry sliced through the quiet night, followed by the rapid thud of footsteps. Amelia didn't look back. She ran, the golden locket clutched tightly in her hand, its faint warmth a small, guiding beacon in the overwhelming darkness. The garden, once a place of tranquil strolls with Charles, was now a treacherous maze of shadows and looming hedges. Her heart pounded, not just from exertion, but from the raw terror that fueled her every stride. Eleanor was close, far too close. She could hear Eleanor's labored breathing, a desperate, rasping sound drawing nearer. Amelia risked a glance over her shoulder. Eleanor, her face contorted with fury, was gaining on her, the dagger still clothing her hand. Amelia knew she couldn't outrun her, not in the sprawling, unfamiliar darkness of the garden. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, a hiding place. She remembered Charles's obsession with the old sundial at the center of the rose garden, a massive stone structure covered in moss and forgotten carvings. He had spent hours there, tracing the faded lines with his fingers, a strange reverence in his eyes. Driven by a desperate, fleeting memory of Charles's peculiar habits, Amelia veered sharply towards the sundial. It stood in the middle of a clearing, bathed in the eerie glow of the moon. As Eleanor burst into the clearing behind her, Amelia slammed her body against the sundial's base. Her fingers, still clutching the locket, brushed against a familiar symbol, the coiled serpent. It was etched deeply into the stone, almost hidden by years of weathering. A surge of energy pulsed through the locket, and then through Amelia's hand. The stone beneath her fingers shifted with a low, grinding sound. A hidden mechanism, silent for decades, whirred to life. A section of the sundial's base slowly slid inwards, revealing a narrow, dark opening beneath. This was it, the labyrinth's key. "No!" Eleanor shrieked, her voice a raw scream of desperation and rage. She knew exactly what Amelia had found, the true entrance to the Havenwood Trust's innermost sanctum. Amelia didn't hesitate. She threw herself into the blackness, tumbling down a short, earthy tunnel. The descent was jarring, a rough landing on damp soil. Above her, she heard Eleanor's frantic scramble to follow, then a frustrated grunt. The hidden entrance, activated by the locket, seemed to be slowly closing. Eleanor, caught off guard, couldn't force it open. Darkness enveloped Amelia, thick and absolute. She lay for a moment, disoriented, listening to the muffled sounds of Eleanor's furious attempts to breach the entrance above. Then silence, a profound, oppressive silence, broken only by her own ragged breathing. She was in a tunnel, the air cold and musty, tasting of ancient earth. As her eyes adjusted, a faint, phosphorescent glow emanated from the walls, revealing rough-hewn stone and a narrow path winding deeper into the earth. This was it, the labyrinth Charles had spoken of. Amelia pushed herself to her feet, her body aching, but a strange sense of purpose now drove her. She had the locket, the literal key, and she had the scrolls, which, she now understood, contained the true map to this hidden world. She had to find the legacy, not just for Charles, but for her own survival. As she moved deeper into the labyrinth, the path began to twist and turn, forming intricate patterns. The phosphorescent glow grew slightly brighter, revealing ancient carvings on the walls, more coiled serpents, hooded figures, and cryptic astronomical charts. This wasn't just a hidden vault. It was a sacred site, a testament to centuries of a secret society. She followed the path for what felt like an eternity, the air growing colder, the silence more profound. Then, she arrived in a vast subterranean chamber. At its center stood a colossal, ornate sarcophagus, shimmering with an ethereal light. Around it, pedestals held what looked like countless other golden lockets, identical to the one in her hand, each pulsing with a faint, internal glow. This was the serpent's coil. This was the true vault. Amelia approached the sarcophagus, a strange reverence filling her. It wasn't a burial chamber. It was a repository. And as she looked closer, she saw that the lid wasn't merely decorative. It was a complex, interlocking mechanism, covered in intricate symbols. The golden locket in her hand vibrated, as if resonating with the energy of the chamber. She pressed the locket against a specific indentation on the sarcophagus, one shaped perfectly to receive it. A low hum filled the chamber, growing in intensity. The stone lid slowly, majestically, began to slide open. Inside, there was no treasure, no piles of gold or jewels. Instead, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was a single glowing crystal. It pulsated with a soft, warm light, casting intricate shadows on the walls. It wasn't just a crystal. It was a living entity, humming with an ancient, raw energy. This was the true family fortune, the power that the Blackwoods had guarded for centuries, the source of their influence. It was a conduit, a nexus, a source of profound, almost ethereal power that transcended mere wealth. As Amelia gazed at it, a wave of understanding washed over her. This power could be used for good, for healing, for creation. But in the hands of the collective, it had been twisted, used for control and manipulation, its true purpose perverted. Charles had tried to free it, to liberate this power from their grasp. A cold, sharp breath hitched behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor's voice, now devoid of rage, was chillingly calm. Amelia whirled around. Eleanor stood at the entrance to the chamber, bruised and disheveled from her struggle, but her eyes fixed on the glowing crystal with a possessive, almost reverent gaze. She had found another way in, a secret passage known only to the chosen few. "You really thought you could stop me, Amelia?" Eleanor advanced, her voice a low murmur. "You thought you could understand what Charles had squandered? This is the true legacy. The power to shape Havenwood, to shape destinies. And it is ours." Amelia gripped the locket, then looked at the crystal, then back at Eleanor. The choice was clear. This power, this ancient energy, could not fall back into the hands of the collective. It had to be freed. With a final, desperate surge of courage, Amelia flung the golden locket directly into the heart of the glowing crystal. The chamber exploded with light. A blinding, deafening flash of pure energy erupted from the sarcophagus, engulfing everything. A high-pitched hum filled the air, rising to an unbearable shriek that vibrated through Amelia's very bones. Eleanor screamed, a guttural cry of shock and agony, as the raw power surged through the chamber, destabilizing the ancient structure. Amelia felt herself lifted, flung backwards by the sheer force of the energy. She hit the cold stone wall, a jarring impact, and then everything went black. Amelia awoke to the sound of birdsong and the gentle warmth of sunlight on her face. She lay on soft grass, surrounded by blooming roses. The grand house, still majestic, loomed in the distance, but something was different. A strange calm hung over Havenwood. The air felt lighter, cleaner. She sat up, her body aching, her head throbbing. The golden locket was gone. The crystal, the sarcophagus, the labyrinth, all were gone. Or rather, they were no longer there, but felt like a distant, fading dream. She looked at her hands. The intricate scar that Charles always had, the coiled serpent symbol, was gone from her wrist, and the faint mark on her own palm, which she'd dismissed as a birthmark, was gone too. The power, the legacy had been dispersed. Freed. Days later, the police concluded their investigation into Eleanor Vance's disappearance. She was never found. The local authorities, bewildered by the structural instability found beneath the Blackwood estate, simply declared it an old, collapsed cellar. The Blackwood fortune, the one Amelia had known, remained irrevocably gone, dissolved into a myriad of empty accounts and untraceable transactions. Amelia chose to stay in Havenwood. The grand house, stripped of its sinister secrets, no longer felt like a tomb. It was just an old house, waiting to be filled with new memories. She started working at the local library again, finding solace in the quiet rhythm of books and the familiar faces of the townspeople. The memory of Charles, the man she loved, was still there, but now it was tinged with a profound sadness and a quiet understanding. He had been a man caught between two worlds, a captive of an ancient legacy, trying desperately to break free. His love for her, his sentiment, had been his downfall, but also, in the end, his greatest act of defiance. Amelia never spoke of the labyrinth, the crystal, or the collective. Who would believe her? But sometimes, on moonlit nights, she would walk through the rose garden, past the sundial. She would touch the spot where the hidden entrance once was, a faint hum still resonating deep within the earth, a whisper of the power that once held Havenwood in its thrall. The family fortune, the one she had thought she knew, had indeed disappeared after the funeral. But in its place, a far more ancient and profound legacy had been revealed, and in freeing it, Amelia had found her own kind of peace, a quiet strength born from facing the darkness and choosing to bring light back to her world. The shadows still lingered, but she no longer feared them. She had truly broken free. The echoes of a lost fortune can linger long after the gold is gone. Amelia's journey, born from grief and thrust into a world she never knew existed, ultimately led her to a truth far more profound and terrifying than mere monetary loss. The Blackwood legacy wasn't just about wealth. It was about power, control, and a choice between freedom and eternal servitude. She faced the hidden darkness, broke the chains of an ancient secret, and in doing so, found a quiet strength she never knew she possessed. The physical fortune may have vanished, but the true battle was always for something far more valuable: the soul of Havenwood itself, and Amelia's own redemption. What would you do if your family's history was a lie, and its future rested solely in your hands?